we have another exciting opportunity to hear today from another good friend, Roop Singh, who you've had a chance to be introduced to Roop through his TEDx videos that he did with TEDx Atlanta and also with TEDx Emory. And we'll hear a little bit more about the leverage of that artifact, as we had talked about before, as we consider the notion of non-fungible token markets. And Vipul has purchased, you purchased an Ethereum yesterday, right?
That's right.
And as we'll see, the leverage of certain forms of crypto are more powerful to reach into other domains. And Ethereum is clearly an interesting one. We've spent the time, Arup, in our last session, 2 weeks ago, in segueing over here with looking at IoT, IoE, M2M, and under the banner of the age of enchantment. And if we're going to enchant physical things, we can consider enchanting digital things as well. And work in arenas that we can transform and create new opportunities in looking at that space. So it's a great pleasure to have us here in this segment from Roop Singh, who you've heard introductory material from in the TEDx talks. And let me turn it over to this whole new space as we look at the digital environment ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Ben. It's great to keep coming back to these classes. These are the most exciting, insightful discussions I've had with your classes. And Dale, it's good to see you. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this talk is titled Blockchain, the Future is Now. Wait, are we there yet? In this lecture, we will look at a lot of key themes. This is just a quick summary, so you have a sense of where we are going and what you will get out of it. We'll look at disruption, recent trends, what is blockchain, so I'll talk of crypto assets versus Bitcoin. I'm sorry, that should say versus blockchain, in fact. When does blockchain make sense? The principles, what can it do for you? I'll give you a couple of strategic frameworks to view this space from. The paradigm of Internet of Value, how are we getting there and what does it even mean? Predictions that you can keep me honest on. Whose currency is it anyways? We'll talk about private currencies and central bank digital currencies. We'll also look at decentralized finance. What does that mean and why are people using blockchain rails now for alternative set of finance infrastructure? Are we there yet? What are the challenges to get there? And are you a spectator or a player? If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I will take them at the end of the discussion. So imagine that you were in the 1800s, let's say 1860s. This is the time of civil war in the United States. This is the time of a lot of political change. This is also the time when the East Coast of United States wasn't really well connected with the West Coast. So in order to send mail, physical paper mail, from one coast to the other, it used to take about 25 days in horse carriages and horse buggies to deliver that mail. So imagine that. Now, there's an entrepreneur with a company you might know called Western Union, who eventually started a really interesting experiment. He said, I'm going to develop what is called the Pony Express. It'll be a series of horse riders riding about 75 to 100 miles each from East Coast to the West Coast through rugged terrain. And the journey they'll cover is about 2,000 miles. And we can reduce this time to deliver mail from one coast to the other from 25 days to, guess, 10 days. And that was considered a remarkable improvement. Most people didn't think that it could have been done. They marveled at the American spirit of these riders. And it was just fascinating to watch how people would gather around in San Francisco waiting for mail to come in the morning. Around 1860 is when late 1859 is when Congress passed the law to install telegraph lines. And at the end of 1860, October 24th, 1860 is when telegraph sent its first message from one coast to the other. On October 26th, 2 days after, the Pony Express was shut down. It lost about $2,000 or $200,000, sorry, in that time's money. And all the riders were left without a job. That is a familiar story. It's a story of technological disruption and transformation. It's also a very, very familiar story of a lot of retailers in the United States today. It's a lot of familiar story of the publishing houses, and we can talk about Blockbuster versus Netflix. A technology that makes the previous set of business processes completely obsolete. A few seconds to send a telegraph versus 10 days, which was an incremental improvement on the business processes of the past. Let's look at some key trends in this space. These are very recent. JP Morgan tests blockchain payments literally from out of this world in space. Yes, they've been testing how to make Bitcoin payments and set up an infrastructure. If everything went down in this world, in the physical infrastructure world on planet Earth, then we should still be able to make blockchain-based payments using Bitcoin through space. You heard Dr. Ben talk about NFT. That's the latest craze. And if you happen to watch my talk called How Digital Assets Are Changing the Future of Value, then I talk about how digital assets will be converted into NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And that is how we will trade art and collectibles and memorabilia. So it's a 10-second video that was sold for $6.6 million. Masterclass and Island Pay launched world's first central bank digital currency. So this is a private company, MasterCard, that's launching a central bank, a government sovereign bank-based digital currency in Bahamas. Just think about the implications. An original Banksy has been burned into an NFT, and it gathered a lot of money. Banksy painting as a digital token. The artist called Grimes sold about 6 million worth of digital art as NFTs. These are videos and images, but I think 10 of them. Now, mainstream media outlets like CNBC are doing videos on why central banks want to launch digital currencies. Coinbase, which is about to go IPO in a direct listing at NASDAQ, will probably be the first IPO unicorn coming from the crypto space. So we are now coming out of a crypto winter. A few months ago, we were still in it. Whether institutions were going to adopt crypto or not was an open question about 12 months ago. Now it's safe to say that we are coming out of the crypto winter, and we are in the next phase of this journey. So let's just level set the room. Everybody has a different definition of it. I use one, and this is what we will use going forward to ground ourselves in this understanding. What is this thing called blockchain? Blockchain is cryptographically secured distributed ledger with a shared state. What do I mean by that? Let's say there's about 15, 16 of us in this room. We all had a set of transactions between us. We signed, let's just use dollars for now. If we send $20 to each other, and then I send some more to Dr. Ben because I like him, there's a set of transactions that need to be recorded. In the previous world that we're coming from, what we did is we said we will record it in a clearinghouse, also called the bank, and we will trust the record of the bank. Whatever the bank says, we agree. In this distributed ledger mindset, we say, okay, no, we don't need a third party to tell us what is truth. What we will do is we will publish this set of records on, metaphorically, a shared wall. Imagine the wall in front of you, and if we publish all the transactions on that shared wall as they occurred in that moment, we all have the same set of information, and we will believe that to be the truth. So it is a ledger, but it is shared. At the same time, it is encrypted. So what is really blockchain? On a very basic fundamental level, essentially it is a distributed ledger plus encryption. So these two items or ingredients of the recipe have existed for ages. We've been experimenting with distributed ledgers since the late 60s and 70s, call it distributed computing and networks essentially. Encryption has been around since wars have been fought, hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. So you combine these two and you get what is called blockchain. So just to level set everybody, it is not this phantom that everybody makes it out to be. It is a very simple scientific operation, distributed ledger, shared ledger with encryption. This is the famous 2008 white paper from Satoshi Nakamoto. We still don't know who that person or persons
It's
are.
not me.
Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Ben. So, as I said, these ingredients existed way before. There had been a lot of experiments to create what is electronic cash. But this paper was the first one to put them together and give us these nomenclatures of consensus mechanism and blockchain, etc. So it is an iconic discovery at that time. Now, every room I'm in, this is a popular discussion. What is the difference? Is Bitcoin the same as blockchain? Is blockchain the same as Bitcoin? Most people conflate the two. It is not. Blockchain is the foundational technology that has been created for one use case, for peer-to-peer digital cash without a third party, also known as Bitcoin. There are a number of other use cases of blockchain, which we'll get to in a minute, that are distinct from this one use case. It is probably the most well-known and popular use case. And the debate is still out there. Is it a currency or is it a store of value? And I'll let you guys figure that out by yourself. Given that Bitcoin just hit $60,000, would you pay for your house using Bitcoin today if you had it? Would you pay for your car? Would you pay for your children's college education using Bitcoin? That's a question we're still trying to figure out. So here's a view on how you can see blockchain. There are type of currencies using cryptography that we now call cryptocurrencies: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Bitcoin Cash, hundreds of them. Then there are other type of tokenized digital assets or cryptographically secure digital assets. They could be in real estate. We'll talk a little bit more on those types of assets soon. We talked about NFTs, commodities. It could be collectibles. It even could be equity of a company. Digital securities are a real thing. And I think essentially all shares or equity that we buy and sell and issue on stock exchanges today would eventually be digital securities or tokenized securities. There is no question about it in my mind. Then there are a lot of industry use cases. You've explored a few: agriculture, financial services, automotive, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing. I heard mining earlier, in media and retail. So my opinion is that literally everything that you can think of physically around your space and the industries that you interact with on a daily basis to live lives and create wealth, all of them are being disrupted through blockchain somewhere, somehow. In our longer course, I play this game with the students. It's called blockchain bingo. You tell me an industry, I'll tell you a use case. So the question in a lot of people's mind, especially if you haven't really played with it yet, is when does blockchain make sense? This is a question I discuss with CIOs, CTOs, CIOs, CTOs, CEOs all the time. And it's a challenging question. So I came up with this set of 8 principles that you can use to evaluate, is this a good blockchain use case or not? Vipul, you were talking about this earlier. Reason number 8, automation. So my background is essentially in business process management and business process automation. And I heard you guys talk with Dale about IoT and essentially looking at business processes of moving assets, either physical or digital assets, from point A to point B. To me, what attracted me to blockchain was the fact that blockchain essentially is business process automation. It forces you to automate. It forces you to make those processes efficient in a much more stronger manner than our traditional approaches of Six Sigma, TQM, business process management, et cetera, got companies to do, especially bigger, larger enterprise companies. It forces you to look at the end-to-end business processes, end-to-end value chain, rather than just within your company. And what that does, it forces you to think who adds value, who doesn't. Authenticity. When you use this distributed ledger plus encryption, what does it give us? It gives us immutability, meaning once the transaction is published, once we believe that, once we publish this data, this information, we believe that this is the version of truth in that moment. So a lot of the business processes set up in the world using databases are inefficient because we have to go from party to party and reconcile that data over and over again. Every day, if you look at banking or any kind of logistics supply chain, we try to reconcile that data maybe every day, every week, every month, and it's just reconciliation and replication over systems over and over again. And there's a cost to creating that business process, both in human terms and in computing power terms. So what blockchain gives us is immutability. Once data is published, we consider it to be truth, and everybody gets it at the same time. There is no question what is the nature of truth in this moment. It gives us auditability. We can go back and see what transaction occurred and when. But here's the distinction. It gives it auditability across the entire network, not just your company or your one partner. Let's say there are 8 partners in this value chain. Everybody has that auditability and provenance. Where did this data come from? How was it changed? And where does it lie now? Decentralization. We have lived the world in a centralized model for a long time. Now we're exploring not just decentralization in terms of networks, but also in terms of peer-to-peer interactions and how companies are part of that ecosystem. This is a much stronger wave that is about to hit companies. And when you look at decentralization, you also realize the fallacies of a centralized model. So if you've been following breaches and hacks around the world, in my first TED Talk titled, Who Owns Your Digital Identity? I start with talking about these hacks at Equifax, or compromises, the way you want to define it, at Facebook, the federal government, and they don't stop. We can keep talking about it, they just don't stop. One of the fallacies of that model is that it is centralized. Once you put your set of records in one central place, you provide a target to a bad actor to come and hack it. And they come and easily do it, and thank you, bye-bye. So we're now moving into a decentralized world where data is stored in a distributed and decentralized way. So if even one node or one vault, so to say, is compromised, the others are still there replicated, and all the data is not stored in one place. Disintermediation. Going back to business processes, blockchain forces us to see who adds value. And there are a lot of business processes in the world where there are intermediaries that have no job but to almost verify, authenticate, and provide a level of trust through the business process. They actually don't add any value. So what this is allowing us to do is to consider who should be part of that network, who truly does add value, and the rest should be eliminated. And if you are in a company or you see some companies who are in the middle of this, you could easily be disintermediated. The train is coming for you. Proof of ownership. Who owns this land? Who owns this car? Who owns this house? Who owns this building? The idea of ownership and title is something that we have used around the world to create wealth and to create a system of ownership and passing on through generations. If you've ever lived in a developing country, what you will find is that land ownership is written in literally physical records, ledgers, registers, and it's stored in some old warehouse somewhere, and anybody could go and change that record, and they often do. And then you don't have your house that you got as an ancestry from your great grandparents down to your grandparents, down to your parents. Boom, you don't have it anymore. I changed that one line, you're done. Okay, bye-bye. Who owns the house? We can apply the same principle to automobiles. We can apply the same principle to any asset that you can think of. Proof of authorship. Whose idea is it anyways? We just talked about NFTs. The idea of I created this and hence it is mine, or a set of us created this and hence this is mine. This is going back to when patents started appearing. This is just another evolution on managing patents. I believe all the patents as USPTO will eventually be on blockchain and around the world. There is no doubt in my mind. Because we have to prove whose idea is this, and then how is this idea, this patent, this box that we put that in, how is this being transferred and being used? Blockchain can allow us to do that. So all of this eventually gives us transparency. So if you look at it from the flip side, if you're looking at a use case, look at, are these principles being satisfied? Is my use case solving these problems? Or in other words, is my use case has these problems to be solved? Is there a lack of transparency? Is there a lack of proof of ownership? Is there a lack of business process automation and business process efficiency? So eventually it gets us to trust. Trust in a trustless world. What does that mean? That means I want to do business with you, but I don't know who you are. So I'm going to create this trust. And we do that today. We do that today with the current systems that we have. The question I have is how much cost are we spending on that trust? Cost meaning human cost and also computing power. Trust and transparency in an automated world. So as you think about transparency and automation, also think about devices. The number of devices that we have on the planet and the amount of data that they're sharing is increasing exponentially. Network law and Moore's law is here to tell us that. And imagine just 5 years from now, how much data would we be sharing? How do we share that effectively? With trust. Blockchain gives us a way to create the trust more efficiently. So here are the principles when to use blockchain, when does it make sense. I'm going to take a sip of water and let you grasp this. So blockchain is a technology, yeah? Okay, let's do a quick poll. In this room, about 16 of us. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think your understanding of blockchain as a technology is? 10 being novice, and 1 being novice and 10 being expert. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you lie in your understanding of blockchain as a technology? Put it in the chat, please. Dr. Ben, I'm not watching the chat. Could you tell me what kind of scores we get?
We've got quite a range at the lower end, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and a couple ones or early ones, and then 2s, 3s, and 4s.
I'm sure Dale is a 10.
No, Dale had to step off. So.
Okay, now let me ask you another question. On the same scale of 1 to 10, what is your understanding of blockchain as a strategy? So not blockchain as a technology, but blockchain as a strategy. Same question, 1 to 10.
Much higher, a lot of 8s. 1, 0, and some 3s. So it's spread much more, but early ones were in the 8s.
Okay.
As opposed to the opposite on the other question.
Okay. So we can tell we are in an MBA class.
Right.
What can blockchain do for you? To me, blockchain is not merely a technology. It is in fact a strategy that is redefining business models, redefining how markets are created, and redefining new set of consumer behavior as well. So look at this framework. I'll give you a minute to just absorb this. At a tactical level, blockchain can help us replace old legacy technology stack and reduce the technical debt, which is akin to saying, you automate some of your business processes inside the company, just or even inside a department, and not look outside of it. As you move towards the center of the framework, you'll find that you can go expand your vision and your lens to the entire end-to-end business process, end-to-end value chain. And from that standpoint, you can reconfigure your partner relationships, and you can reconfigure the business models and business efficiency that you get out of those relationships, and even redefine your connection with the consumer. Moving more to the strategic end, you can enable growth. You can invent new products, which we have discussed, being NFTs being new products, so being crypto-based payments, and tons of other things. So plenty of examples there to see how new markets are being created and deeper consumer engagements are being created. Then eventually, as you redraw verticals and enable new business models, that is when you're in the strategic land. So when you're evaluating your blockchain use cases, see across the spectrum, where do you lie? And is there an opportunity to go further to the right, further on the strategic spectrum? My principle is, if you're looking for incremental change, if you're looking for Pony Express and you want to use blockchain for it, don't do it. Anything that is 5, 10, even 20, 30% incremental efficiency gains, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it for this whole hoopla. Unless you are taking a transformative, revolutionary disruption approach where you're redrawing your existing landscape completely, that's when blockchain really gives you that power. That's where it allows you to create a different world. And a lot of bigger companies have had that challenge. They love the technology, but they don't want to disrupt the current status quo of business relationships they have. Or they're not willing to accept that there are new infrastructure being developed based on crypto and blockchain, and they're not willing to accept that the world that they live in will actually change. The future state will not look as current state. So examine yourself. Where do you lie on the spectrum? Here's another view of what you could do, of what blockchain could do for you. Reduce infrastructure and transaction costs, protect intellectual property, or transfer in digital or physical assets.
I have a question, Roop.
Can you note the question in the chat and we'll take it up at the end?
Sure, that works.
Okay, thanks. So this is just a laundry list of companies, spaces or industries being disrupted. And this is not an exhaustive list. You'll hear in a minute me talk about a book. And we've been researching for the book. We just crossed, in the book, we have a set of use cases that we want to show the world. In our research, we just crossed the 100 mark of 100 different use cases of blockchain. So as I said, you could think of any industry on this planet. Blockchain has something to do with it. Blockchain alone is not enough. It's a misnomer to think blockchain can solve all the problems on the planet, and it is this mythical superior being that comes and it has spiritual powers and leads you to salvation and nirvana. It is not true. It solves for certain things and only those things, and it does it well. We will live in a paradigm where all these other technologies will be part of the technology stack of future business applications. So I have never believed that blockchain alone is enough. We have to have IoT, we have to have smart contracts, running on chain. We have to use AI and data analytics and business intelligence. What will change will be these decentralized blockchain platforms, or let's call them data sharing layer at the bottom of all business applications. So a lot of you come from the ERP world, and this is, if you want to think of this as another evolution of ERPs. You know what, ERPs are what, 30 or odd years old. We started with the whole paradigm of EDIs, which gotten into, you know, what we now use as SAP and Oracles and NetSuite and all that. So eventually these ERPs will also be on blockchain-based networks. And a lot of them, including Oracle, including SAP, including Pegasus, they've all invested in this space. It's a natural evolution for them to sit on top of blockchain-based platforms or blockchain-based networks where companies are interacting their data through these platforms. It's just way more efficient. We came from an internet of information. We got to an internet of agreements, which is in between sort of where we are now. We're getting to internet of value. What do I mean by that? We will transfer assets, be it physical assets in their digitized form as digital twins or other digital assets, and we will trade them in a peer-to-peer mechanism using blockchain-based networks. That's how the promise of internet of value will be fulfilled. Here's a quote from one of my first articles in the space, and I throw that in there just so that you feel that I'm this intellectual powerhouse. It's a jumble of words, so feel free to read it. Now that you think I'm just amazing, let's move on. So where are we headed to? And you guys can keep me honest on this. And I've been saying these for a while. So in fact, some of these have started to happen now. I mean, I probably said similar things back in 2017 in one of these classes, and we are now seeing the evidence of them. Trade finance and retail payments using smart contracts and cryptocurrencies. It's already starting to happen. Look at how much transaction BitPay does, which is one of the largest processor of payments using cryptocurrencies. Distributed ledgers as the underlying data sharing layer for all critical data. We will have peer-to-peer data sharing exchanges and marketplaces. And you can change the word data to digital assets. So tokenizing all assets using blockchain, anything that is physical or virtual will be on a digital, call it tokenized blockchain-based asset, and it will be traded seamlessly on global secondary markets, giving rise to internet of value. The latest NFT craze is a perfect example of that. All forms of identity and ownership will be validated through blockchain platforms. And you see a lot of, if you watch my first TED Talk, you know, it's all about identity. I think identity use case of blockchain is in fact even more powerful and more wide impacting than cryptocurrencies. Okay, changing tracks a little bit. We looked at some predictions. Let's talk about whose currency is it anyways. Central banks have been looking to create digital currencies for a while now, and there are a lot of examples of that happening. So the bottom line here to think about is, well, what's happening in the world? The architecture of money is changing. Money is not what you think it used to be. Money is not the cash you had in your hand. This programmable money is the next future. And some might argue that that future may come out of a central bank, ironically, than a startup. If you've been following the news, there was Facebook had launched a currency and a blockchain network called Libra a while ago, which they have now rebranded to DM. So to us, DM was an inflection point in blockchain's journey. And that forced central banks to take notice, and they had to react to it. And they had to understand this technology and see how they will address questions of privacy, at the same time, how they will address questions of dealing directly with their consumers. So here's an interesting thought. We've all been through this pandemic. We've all seen stimulus packages being talked about, and we all have probably received stimulus payments. Go back to the day when PPP program was launched. It was launched essentially operationally through banks. And if you remember the confusion early on, a lot of banks, if you did not do business banking with them, or if you did not have X amount of, let's say, balance in your account, they wouldn't even consider or let you even apply for a PPP loan. So the point I'm making is central banks wanted to interact with their citizens, but they had to go through payment and banking infrastructure by private companies. What CDBC could allow is direct connection between central banks and consumers. So in other words, if I had a central bank wallet, a CDBC, a digital dollar wallet on my phone, so if the bank wanted to send me a payment, it could directly send it to my wallet. There is no need to go through any other infrastructure. That's one way to think about it. So China has been experimenting it for a while, and they've been doing it for two purposes. One is for trade finance, create a two-tier monetary system for commercial banks, so bank-to-bank interaction, or let's call it large-scale bank-to-bank interaction. And then another CBDC focused on public, directly consumers, so B2B and B2C. And they have been really good experiments, and digital yuan is coming. Digital yuan probably would come before digital dollar. They already have patents in it. They've been experimenting with it. It's all news now, to be frank. And when we talk about it in these classes, people go like, wait, so what's happening in the world? Yes, in our lifetime, God willing, we will live in an era where you will have digital dollars and digital rupees and digital rubles and digital yuan and digital euro, and you will interact directly with the central bank in your wallet, on your phone. So DM, which was Facebook's Libra project, launched an arms race of private companies and consortia issuing alternative payments. So on one side, you have private companies. On the other side, you have central banks. And there's a war right now. There is an arms race going on, and it clearly establishes a threat to the US dollar as a reserve currency. So the bigger point to remember here is, because of these digital native companies, as I call them, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, take your pick, because of their close relationship with you, the consumer, they're in your phone, they're in your life. They're investing in engines of value exchange, which really means fintech, if you want to use that term, or infrastructure layer for payments, new rails that are being developed. And these are outside of the current banking system, outside of the central banking system. And this leads to the architecture of money changing and the way we really do trade, commerce, and finance in the world. And there's a race to establish a stable digital currency for the internet. And it may come out of a private company issuing currency, or it may come out of a government. So we are moving from an era of fintech, which is transfer of money on the internet, which essentially, if you go back in history, PayPal was a good example of fintech. We had internet, and then we figured out how to transfer money in the form that we knew it at that time on the internet. We're moving from that era to decentralized finance, transfer of value on blockchain networks. So think about this. If you have that wallet and you have a balance on that wallet, and you say, okay, Vipul just bought his first Ethereum. Now he has My guess is you probably went to Coinbase because that's one of the most user-friendly and popular exchanges at the moment in the United States. So you have a balance on your Coinbase account. Once your euphoria of buying your first Ethereum goes away and you have a substantial balance, you wonder, well, what can I do with it? It's just sitting there laying eggs. Well, wait, can it lay eggs? That's where we're at. We're looking at DeFi, decentralized finance. What can you do with that balance sitting in your account? So there is an opportunity to earn crypto interest that has attracted investors to DeFi platforms. And assets on DeFi platforms grew to over 1.2 billion in 2019, which is what, about 2 years ago now, right? So this is a huge trend between digital assets and DeFi. These are the two shining banner stories for the blockchain space. Just take a look at these companies that are essentially DeFi platforms. You can do all kinds of financial risk management. You can do all kinds of leveraging. You can earn interest rates way higher than what you're earning in your Bank of America US dollar account. So think about the ecosystem that's being built, an alternative set of decentralized finance payment rails and platforms where you can manage your money better. And you could be on the flip side. You could be getting loans or collateralized loans based on your crypto assets in your wallet. Here's an example. It allows 4x leverage on margin trading. Traders will kill for 4x leverage on margin trading. So moving on, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. I've talked a very positive and bullish story, which I believe in, but are we there yet? There are challenges on the road. Historically, scalability in blockchain networks has been a challenge. I believe that we have solved for it. Some people might disagree with me. And the way I see it is this. Give me a use case and I will develop a scalable network needed for that particular use case. We may not have solved for all use cases, but for most use cases, we have blockchain networks available at scale, which means that we have enough transactions per second to satisfy your use case. So let's take an example. If you were developing an identity use case, or let's say transportation of vaccines, or movement of physical pallets, as in the case of Bramble that you heard before, these use cases do not require a very high transaction per second. And we have currently the blockchain capacity to sustain those use cases. The technology itself is maturing. And there's a point to be made about the pace of innovation, the rate of innovation in this space. I have not seen anything mature so fast. So there's in our bigger course, we talk about this chart. You must have seen it somewhere. How long did it take for us to adopt televisions? How long did it take for us to adopt fax machines, and then mobile phones, and then apps? And here we are adopting cryptocurrencies, and then everything that happens on a crypto wallet. So the time it takes for humans to adopt that has decreased dramatically. A part of it is the innovation, the speed of innovation itself. And the other part of it is changing consumer behavior, consumer trust on it, and younger people growing in that landscape. For them, this is not new. This is how the world is. And they just take it at face value, and it allows them to function in that sense. It is not a shift, which it is for a lot of people who come from a different era of technology. Security, although blockchain are tamper resistant, I would never call them tamper proof. But security remains to be a challenge, and there are a lot of networks that their underlying governance needs to be improved for us to call them secure, even if they're blockchain-based networks. And taking a leap forward, no pun intended, when quantum computing is a reality, which is increasingly becoming, then we will have to change a lot of encryption methodologies in these blockchain networks so we can respond to quantum computing. Standardization is still an issue, and a lot of bigger companies developing use cases for blockchain get stuck here. If you look at what UPS and FedEx have done in the transportation space, they've been trying to define a set of standards in logistics and transportation for blockchain, but it's been a challenge. Standardization and agreeing to certain set of standards has always been a challenge, right? Going back to your wireless devices and wireless networks, like 10, 15 years ago. So we are still evolving in that sense. There is a regulatory risk. We still don't know if Ripple is a security or not a security. There's a big SEC case going on, very recent, and Ripple is one of the shining examples in this space or corporate use of blockchain, and we still don't know. There are a lot of countries that believe it's not a security. United States and SEC is saying it is. So the jury is still out. The market is maturing. There are, I believe, too many players solving for similar use cases, and it will definitely lead to consolidation. And on the other hand, you will also see the question, where are the real users? When will they come? And they're coming. At this stage in 2021, you can say last 2 years, we have sort of jumped the shark, especially in crypto adoption. And you will see the effects of it in digital asset, digital tokens adoption, which are different than crypto, as we explained before. And you will start seeing adoption in what I call industry use cases. So you've heard me talk. The question is, are you a spectator watching this game being played on your screens? Or are you a player playing this game and creating the rules? Because there is a game being played. The choice is yours. Thank you, Dr. Ben. Now we can take questions.
Let me direct some of those that have already been posted in the chat, and then we'll open up for further discussion as well. Prasad, I'm going to let yours. We're going to come back to yours in just a minute, but just in the leverage context of the player versus spectator side, Ray says he's got $50,000 that he wants to throw at crypto. And so he wants to know, should he just do Bitcoin? And by the way, Vipul's responded to him saying he should diversify among a portfolio of Ethereum, Litecoin, and so forth, certainly because there are other use patterns and volatility. Any comments to address those 2 points?
Yeah. So Ray, nothing what I've said now or I'm about to say should be construed as investment or legal advice. I'm not a financial advisor.
You're off the hook. You're good.
Oh, you never know what happens these days. Here's my response to you. First, decide what's the instrument you want to use. Do you want to be in crypto? And if the answer is yes, understand there's over, my guess is over 4,000 cryptos today. Forget Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? Understand the basic use cases for them, understand the technology or what I call solution design differentiations between those products. So understand how one is different from the other and what use cases would it be used for, and also understand how developed or evolved is their ecosystem, because a superior technology sitting in a lab is not worth anything. Only adopted technology is worth something. So I would do that investigation and only invest in something that you understand and believe in. Don't invest in anything just because the value might go up and there is this consensus that you feel watching social media that, oh, this is going to be amazing. That's point number one. Point number two, here's another option to invest that 50K. Become an angel investor or talk to me. I'm raising a blockchain fund to invest in early stage companies developing a lot of these infrastructures and these products. You can get in on the ground level and invest as an investor and own part of the equity and help these companies actually see the light of the world. That's another way to invest. Does that answer your question?
It does. That's a pretty interesting thought, the angel investor piece.
Right. Okay. What What else?
Prashant, you want to raise your question about your SAP?
Yeah, I think Roop answered it already. So I've been in the SAP space, and ERP, every company implements the same ERP, spending millions and millions of dollars, and it does the same function, the same purchase orders, the same sales orders, and it seems you talked about it already. That's a field waiting to be disrupted with blockchain-based ERPs. So you covered it already.
Yeah, especially when you get into visibility, supply chain visibility. When we look at supply chains and you have a mutable record associated with blockchain structures in there, it gives you a visibility that brings is carriage with trust. And so that visible trust allows a lot of different patterns in the supply chain domain. Roop, do you want to say something beyond that?
No, I think all of these ERPs eventually will be on a blockchain-based network. That is the defining statement in my mind. That there is nothing to be said, nothing else to be said in that regard. I think if you unpack that and look beneath the layers, what is really happening is these are the questions being asked. Who should be part of that network? Supply chain or any ERP, essentially a layer on top of the business network that you've created. So who needs to be part of the network? What data am I sharing with them? What data are they sharing with me? What data is being shared together? Who's reading, who's writing, and who gets business value out of it? There has always been an information asymmetry for companies to leverage. And now that all of that paradigm is being questioned. So as you develop a blockchain-based ERP, if you will, the question is, what are the players? What data is being shared? Who's reading? Who's writing? And what is the information asymmetry for my company? Am I losing competitive advantage or am I gaining competitive advantage?
The unique opportunity with a blockchain record is more than just passive storage, and that you can put activity in there. Start thinking about incorporating smart contracts into that. And so as Roop was saying, making decisions on who can share what. Yes, I can build a truth, but who am I going to allow to have access to that truth? And who's going to govern that accessibility to the truth? Just as your medical record shifting in with blockchain into a patient ownership side, I'm doing the same thing. I'm inverting these markets. We've talked about Shoshana Zuboff's book and surveillance capitalism issues. As I'd mentioned before, the people-centered internet that I'm involved in is all about allowing you to own and control the data. And so the difference from an institutional structure to share is moving into the opportunity for the individuals themselves to set rules over content that they govern, to have effective sharing of information and according to your rules. And so that's part of the thing that's going to change. If you look on these things as speeding up the mess, you miss out. And that means the ERP as we've known it is less about an ownership captive data lakes and structures than it is about means and mechanisms to share rights and privileges of access in relevant ecosystems. And that's what's going to change.
Yeah, great point. Monica, I like your question. Could you come on video and sort of elaborate on it so we can respond?
Yeah, sure. And I think you answered some of it around trust being a risk with blockchain in general, but I just see it's a challenge when there's no central governing body to prove that the transactions are accurate. If you have issues, issue resolution, and just how can a company become trusting in a system when it's so disentangled, I guess is at the root of my question.
Right. So I'm glad you brought it up. This is a reaction a lot of people have. So let's untangle and unpack that. First of all, let's separate a few things. When you say moving to blockchain, blockchain is a technology, the same way steam engine was. Cryptocurrency is one use case of blockchain. So let's separate them out. You say when it is overseen by no one or everyone, requires a lot of trust in the system. You are partially right. It is so the innovation in a lot of these public blockchain cryptocurrency implementations is the following. Not only does it use a technology, which is distributed ledger plus encryption, they have also come up with new governance models. And this goes back to your question too, Ray, every implementation of cryptocurrency, you will find that it has a different consensus model, and they have a set of governance mechanisms built in that are different from each other. So one of the biggest value add, in my opinion, from these experiments, if you will, is how governance works. Because we are rejecting the idea of central party-based governance. So, okay, what is the other option? And these are n number of options. So as just an observer, you could say, well, we'll see which option wins. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, there are governance mechanisms built in each one of these cryptocurrency implementations. You decide which one you like and choose which one you want to put your money in. Having said that, I think if you look at the leading ones, be it Ethereum or be it Bitcoin or a few other ones, EOS, Stellar, even Ripple for that matter. If you look underneath the hood, they are very secure. And the trust that you talk about is not in a person or in an entity. The trust is in the code. We eventually will live in a world where we will trust the code. Will we have hiccups along the way on that? Absolutely, no doubt in my mind. But it is not, that does not stop technological evolution or human progress. So eventually we will come to an era where we will trust the code. And if you just unpack, just take Bitcoin, there are a set of rules when a transaction is considered to be the truth. And every consensus mechanism has to define that. And and which part of the chain that's added to, I mean, if I did a session on architecture, we could go deeper into that. But there are a set of rules that determine if this is a true and valid transaction, and then how the chain propagates, and what happens in the case the chain has a bad actor, what happens in the case when we find the transactions are not matching up. These are things that the software has to define and implement. And if they haven't done it, then it's not a good implementation. But most of the leading ones have, and the proof is in the pudding. Bitcoin has never been hacked. What's the market cap on it today? What, $400 billion or some odd, right? Ethereum's never been hacked. What has been hacked are these endpoints, which other people have created. And they have not been good about security on those endpoints. You publish your wallet keys on this class, and then you claim, oh, somebody hacked me. Oh, I'm sorry, too bad. Or if there are websites and exchanges that are very lo-fi and low fidelity, and they haven't put enough emphasis on security. Those are the endpoints. The chain itself has never been hacked. Does that help?
That helps a lot. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bino, you want to talk about your question? Sorry, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, no. I wanted to go to Bina.
Thanks, Ben and Roop. So yeah,
I can't hear you.
Is it better now? Are you able to hear me all right?
Barely.
It's better. Go ahead.
Okay. So Roop, my question was, again, typically large enterprises do not want to cut a large check for transformation. Many of them have been through several waves of transformation, right? And so often the exec team wants to see some sort of a proof of value before they are willing to play ball, right, on a larger transformation program or cutting the check for a larger transformation program. So my question was, what does a proof of value engagement look like in the blockchain space? And if you have any examples from manufacturing, that would be great.
Sure. So I have three main thoughts on it. We teach a course called Blockchain Strategy for Business Leaders, and Dr. Ben's been part of it, and we're now looking to even create that into an online program. So we run into this question from enterprises, or what I call incumbent enterprises, quite a bit. And take my words with I say this with some humility. The question that they are not willing to play ball, okay? The question is, does blockchain need enterprise or enterprise need blockchain? Blockchain does not give a crap if you're not willing to play ball. Point being, you are going to be disrupted, period. This is how the world is going to be. There is no question. If you don't do it, fine, your choice. There are other people that are doing it. Your competitors are doing it, and there are other disruptors that are coming in to disrupt you. And we'll talk a lot more about that in a second. So what I have found is a lot of the senior executives have barely any understanding of this transformation that's happening globally. They barely have an understanding of the technology itself, and hence they don't appreciate why, when, how it can be applied. They conflate the promise of it to the actual implementation of it, or the lack of promise in their mind. They are defending status quo. Status quo will not remain, period. That is how I start my course. It's about changing a mindset and jumping over an intellectual hurdle. If you believe that there will be a new world, what that new world is going to look like, the question I have for your CIO, CTO, CXO is, will you be there? It's not a question of, oh, should I do it or not? Will you exist? That's point number one. Now let's talk about some kind of value or some POC. So yes, plenty of companies have done a lot of POCs, and they have gotten learnings from them. They've gotten technical learnings as well as ecosystem learnings. And a lot of companies are now investing in basically figuring out, which of these 10 use cases that we could imagine, which one of them have a business case? And I completely agree that you can't just go by technology itself. You have to have a business case, a business model, a revenue model behind it, in the light that there will be disruption, in the light that there will be new rules. So you have to develop that business case, and you have to create that small POC. And a lot of companies are doing that. So the question in manufacturing, I'm trying to think if something comes to mind as an example, but just let's take, what is manufacturing? It's a supply chain of material coming into your door, and then you creating a product out of it, and shipping it out through your distributors, right? That's essentially is manufacturing. So if you look at that supply chain, how do you manage that supply chain today? What is the time between sharing data on that supply chain? Are there efficiencies to be had? I would look at those use cases and then use the principles that I've shared here to create a valid, valuable use case for blockchain. Not all use cases will be valuable that you come up with, but identify those, and then either create your own consortium, your own set of partners, or go to an existing consortium. So if you actually take a very wide lens, what's going to happen is eventually we're going to live in a world where there'll be blockchain implementations, maybe on ERP-based platforms, for each of the use cases. Meaning, let's take Spinach. Spinach will have one popular blockchain, so will Diamonds, but trade finance would have another blockchain-based platform. So each of these use cases would eventually be a set of blockchain-based platforms that will exist in the world. And they'll be optimized for that particular use case. And the choice now for an enterprise or an incumbent companies, either we create that platform and network ourselves, or we join a consortia, a set of other players that have already created it. And find any industry, advertising, manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, finance, pharmacy, video games, just name any industry. All of them have some kind of consortia forming for blockchain-based implementation.
So much of our success rests on the quality of those POCs. And so much of that success rests on the proper partners inside and outside. And we often blow it in the first, what we call the first 5 minutes, in deciding who should be at the table and what the expectations of the POC are and what the implications of the POC are. Before we move on next, I want to go to Lydia, but Sanjay, are you online? I wanted you to respond to Prashant's comment about ERP. Sanjay Roth is an SOB, premier SOB, who is a world-class ERP expert. And by the way, here's how successful he is. He was the SAP expert inside Oracle. Can you imagine being in the enemy camp and being perceived the SAP guru inside Oracle as they need to deal with that? Now, Sanjay is with Dell Technologies now. Sanjay, do you want to comment? Are we completely off base on our ERP assertion of evolution?
Absolutely not. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, indeed, I was one of the handful people in an elite group of Oracle practice doing some, high-end consulting in Oracle. And I happened
he didn't start his car. The reason he has an electric car right now, he has a Tesla, in part, is because he could start his car remote. And being the SAP guy at Oracle, he was afraid to start his car.
Well, thank you. But anyway, so I did leave Oracle because they actually had a company mandate that do everything that is related to Oracle. You can't touch SAP. Literally, I was told, I said, okay, well, this is the dawn of the day. I'm going to go and look for something. And I ended up working for Dell. As I was telling Ben last time, we are gradually moving into AI in certain operational practice. And, he has been very kind enough to invite me into these lectures, and I'm really benefiting quite a bit out of it. Thank you, Ben. I don't know if you want me to talk anything more.
No, I just wanted, if you had any observations from the standpoint of the ERP evolution. Prashant was referencing the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars go into these operating infrastructures that we've had in the past, and they're all based on assumptions of data ownership and control. And do you see the underpinning, probably bifurcation in the ERP initially that will incorporate blockchain elements in it too? But what's the intermediate game and what's the end game on what blockchain means to ERP futures?
Yes. So, ERP, as if you would know, in the 1990s when ERP actually became popular, coming from AS400, IBM hardware, hosting ERPs, and then eventually, that's the only place where they had ERP, SAP. And then eventually they moved into client server technology when mid-range servers came in, and then it really became very popular after that. With Linux, with the advent of Linux, it created a huge opportunity for companies to go and do either in-house hosting, or they went with a data center based hosting company like HP, IBM, and many other companies that are involved, Sun Solaris. And then eventually you see the new wave of migrations that are happening currently, AWS, Azure, and now Google GCP is in the fray as well. Now, having said that,
if we look at SAP evolution, and you've got HANA structures in there that are very much memory intensive, exposed data operating, and where does blockchain fit into that evolution of SAP or other ERPs?
So blockchain, I mean, I understand blockchain, a little bit at a very high level overview, outline. I do see blockchain playing a major role, particularly when you have, for example, if you think about HANA is split from an architectural perspective. HANA is split across multiple machines. You can distribute HANA workload across multiple machines. And if you go down into other technologies, database technologies, you had Oracle had its own distributed architecture, which is called Oracle RAC. And I'm absolutely very comfortable to say that blockchain is going to play a central role, because with the distributed architecture already in place, blockchain is going to play a big role, or is already playing a big role in the development of distributed transactional architecture. The other day, I was actually looking at Google and Azure. They're actually distributing their workloads across the continents. And I'm not really going to be surprised with blockchain coming in and actually giving that architecture at the application level. I haven't seen that yet, but there is R&D going on within SAP. Maybe in a couple of years, you're going to see those things coming in, but it's not.
Yeah, maybe maybe Prashant, you and Sanjay might be interested in connecting. You might have some useful discussion. Go ahead, Prashant.
No, okay. I was just saying, yeah, that sounds like a amazing opportunity. Yes, thank you.
Lydia, you had a question about the healthcare domain. Do you want to voice that for Roop?
Yes, sure. So I just want to see your insight about healthcare, and if it makes sense that a blockchain will be used, especially in HIPAA and data privacy, that is costing a lot of money when it's breached for legal fees. So what is your insight on where we are right now?
So if you look at the screen, this is a roadmap for blockchain and healthcare. On short term, we're looking at consortia being developed and pilot projects, but no patient data being used on those pilot projects. I think medical records on blockchain are the ultimate, the most promising use case. But with the way the entire healthcare infrastructure and the entire business model that's set up, that is a road far away. And it's not because of technology, it's really because of business choices. So as you see, in medium term, we will have systems that can scale in a permission-based type blockchain, and we really didn't discuss much, but in the longer course, we get into, there are public blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin, et cetera, that we talked about, even Ripple. And then you could develop private permission-based networks. Now, which one would be better for you? It depends on your use case. But a lot of healthcare consortia are looking to develop private permission-based networks where they will trade this data. And they will start with some patient data, some experimentation. Eventually, I think, in my mind, the goal is, I am a patient, I should have my health records on my phone. Doesn't matter which provider I go to, and I would say even internationally, doesn't matter I go to a doctor here in Costa Rica or India. I should have my health records on my wallet, and I should be able to pass them on and receive them back. Now, here's the other part of that question. HIPAA. So if you actually study HIPAA, HIPAA is an obstacle to this vision, as the way currently HIPAA is written. And I understand the motivation behind writing HIPAA in the way it is written. I think it can be implemented much better on a blockchain-based network, the same principles or spirit of HIPAA. But if you look at the law, a lot of companies have run into the current state of law of HIPAA and how these implementations want to do things. So this also brings me to a much bigger point, and somebody had a question on regulation. Regulation and regulators are usually 2 phase lag behind technology.
Right.
A lot of these new companies, startups, products, projects you see will eventually hit this bottleneck of regulation, which is the same thing that happened with Uber and same thing that happened with Airbnb. So that shouldn't stop innovation. Regulation will evolve. And it is our job to create technology-led innovation and then allow or even educate regulators and develop new regulation, meaningful regulation that belong in this new framework, because the old framework has changed. So I don't think of that as a showstopper, but it's definitely an obstacle, and it's a fight. It's an uphill fight. And in a lot of cases, there are industry consortiums and associations that are working with regulators to help them understand and grow. A recent case is FINRA, just maybe 2 months ago, passed, I would say, a opinion on wallets. And they're doing that for certain reasons, which we can understand. So a lot of this crypto industry basically launched a campaign to help them understand how wallets actually work and what should and shouldn't be done. And same thing will happen in healthcare. So here's another view of the same journey. We will have, in medium terms, we'll look at claims management, payments, and prior authorizations. So it's increasing level of complexity. We'll look at smaller complexity first and larger complexity after. Drug supply chain is very promising. You mentioned the FDA. I think drug supply chain has even a bigger impact and meaning in developing countries. So think about all the vaccines that are coming out now. What is an authentic vaccine? How do I know? Especially in countries in Asia and Africa, where there's a lot of fraud in vaccination, which is an authentic vaccine. And then where are we storing this vaccination data? If you go to Shanghai, any building today, you have to show your vaccination and COVID test results. My sister was just traveling from Canada to India and back to Canada. They had to show vaccination or not vaccination test results. But that process was so flimsy. They show a PDF. I could edit that PDF on my laptop. That's not real, protection. So how are we storing all that data of who's been vaccinated, what are the results, et cetera, et cetera? That should be on a wallet, which is based on blockchain network. Here's another view. There's a few companies that are looking to change the status quo, if you will. They're developing proof of concepts. Does that address your question somehow?
Yes, very much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Ray, you had a question? Ray?
Sorry about that. It wasn't so much a question. It was just, it just hit me when I was looking at just Robinhood, right? That blockchain is trading, or I'm sorry, cryptocurrency is trading right now. And of course that makes total sense, but it really brings it home when you see the little numbers moving. You say, oh my gosh, this is nothing to do with the stock market or any market. This is its own entity. So I just thought that was it.
That's something that is a very profound and important point. Roop alluded to it earlier. I want you to really think about these things not as speeding up the mess in terms of current practices and roles. And it's a lot more than just disintermediation going on in here, but it's setting whole new rights and privileges. One starts to ask questions. Why do we need a stock market? Why do we need these intermediary structures, these disciplines that have perceived rights or asserted rights or regulated rights right now that can be shuffling the roles and responsibilities, who does what and where. And that's why I think there is no industry that's immune from effects that could change the decision rights and authorities of players in those industries.
Yeah, Ray, so as you start exploring this space, you will have a lot of these aha moments. At one point in my journey, when I started to figure this out and I started to read everything that was out there, it almost was I couldn't sleep at night, because when you understand the implications of it, you just go, it's a drastically new, different world. And back to your point on, it's trading 24/7. That's all news. Crypto has been trading 24/7 for the last 10 years, or maybe 9 years.
Just discovered it.
Right. It's now we are in the world of DeFi networks, where you could leverage your crypto into earning interest, or you could give loans, or you could back insurance. You can manage your risk, and you could be in a liquidity pool. So look at these companies, go check them out, especially Compound, which I hear a lot about, and Maker. It's a different set of financial infrastructure. It's a different set of finance players. It's a different asset that you're trading. And here's the interesting part to just ponder. These markets are fundamentally non-correlated to economy of a particular country or the stock market in the United States, for that matter, any country. They are not the stock market. It's a different market. So think about existential threats, wars, pandemics, market crashes in the stock market. Then you start to watch the behavior of these crypto markets and say how unrelated or uncorrelated they are. So if you were a big money manager, it would behoove you to invest at least a small portion as risk insurance for your stock or for your portfolio, apart from stocks, into these crypto markets, so that you can remain uncorrelated to the stock markets and immune somewhat to those fluctuations and large-scale destabilizing events. Right? It's a fascinating world.
Yeah.
So one of the people I like to hear talk about this is a name. It's a difficult name to pronounce, but you'll get used to it. It's Chamath Palihapitiya. He is the CEO of a large fund called Social Capital. He used to be the former executive at Facebook. And he has made this point on CNBC and many other, Bloomberg and all these mainstream channels, where he says, Bitcoin is a hedge. It's uncorrelated. We don't know what it is correlated to, but it is fundamentally uncorrelated in the fact that it is peer-to-peer cash transaction system. It is not correlated with any government, for that matter. So it would behoove you to manage your risk by buying into Bitcoin. That's his words, not mine. Look up Chamath Palihapitiya and his views on blockchain and Bitcoin. And he has funded a lot of these DeFi platforms. Does that address your question?
It's fantastic. You're right. It was an aha moment just moments ago. And when you talk about healthcare, and blockchain, it helps me say, okay, blockchain is behind cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency and blockchain are not the same thing. Blockchain can drive all kinds of things. And then when you use the healthcare example, because that's been something, my wife used to work for a records company for healthcare. And she remarked 10, 15 years ago how chaotic it was there. And it was just really silly that people don't have sort of this wallet where they can keep all of their records, and blockchain will do that. So it really brings it home. So thank you.
Yeah, we have actually a group that wants to come and visit with you as well on the healthcare briefcase. That works directly in the space, and something that we might have folks pursue as well. That's a very good point.
Hey Ben, could I ask a quick question? Do we have time?
Yeah, we have just a few minutes, and Rupert needs to wrap up. He has he's got to sell his book.
Sell first, sell book first, and then if there's time.
No. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Roop, this was terrific and really well timed. You mentioned FINRA earlier, and I come from a CFP and from a Series 24 background, and I'm very concerned. In fact, I'm having a conversation later today that's on the subject of commercializing this for the masses within the RIA industry. And even the tenor of some of these questions gets at to the biggest concern that I have right now is right now, financial advisors are getting besieged by questions about this industry. And they're absolutely handcuffed by compliance to be able to provide advice or counsel right at this moment in time. And so it's a very, very, I think, important intersection. I think you do a really good job of being able to distill these things in a way that are consumable, and it will inform my conversation later this afternoon. But I'm interested, you mentioned something, and this is where I think the key is, how do you educate the regulators to close that gap, that typically that lag that happens with emerging technologies? You can't afford it because people are getting hurt that are involved in this, that are speculating and they're not informed. And I think the risk is substantive right now.
Yep. Yeah, no,
it's ever been so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that I distilled these well. Maybe I can quote you on that. No, jokes apart, where should we begin? So at the moment, most people don't know this. I don't think, let's see how many of you knew this. You can invest your IRA into crypto today, legally. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You know, that when I say that, people are like, wait, what? You can invest your IRA money into crypto directly. There are plenty of companies, a couple of startups I work with and mentor, a couple of them I'm on the board of, are providing that service. And when they say that to the consumer or the advisor community, they just go like, huh? Yes, that's the truth. So things are happening. Now, in terms of working with regulators, I'll give you a very quick case study, which I think is a really good example of how this can happen and be replicated. So there's a company out of UK called Navarro. They issued bonds on Ethereum blockchain, I believe in 2018. Don't quote me on that, either 17 or 18. And what they did is they worked with FCA, the UK regulator. And what FCA did is FCA created a sandbox to experiment with these things, with these new instruments. By the way, all bonds, as I said, all securities are eventually going to be on blockchain. So there's no doubt. So they worked with FCA. They showed them how the technology works. And in return, they also addressed the fundamental framework questions that the regulator has. I believe that there is a role for regulators, and their position of protecting the investor is very much respected. And there are a lot of players in this industry who would want to and are working with regulators. There's a company called Vertalo that I interact with quite often. They work with SEC very directly, and they have been for the last 4 or 5 years. SEC just issued what they call a risk opinion on digital assets. And it's very good. It's like an 8-9 page document. I was reading it the other day, and it shows that the regulators understand how this thing works. At the same time, they're trying to develop a new framework for these new set of technologies. So to me, you have to sit with them. You have to respect their position. You have to help them understand the technology, and you have to help them understand how the previous or current status quo of regulatory regime was developed based on previous technologies. You know, if it takes 3 days to settle a check, or if it takes 2 days to settle a share, that's just old technology constraints. That has nothing to do with regulation. I could settle a share today within seconds or even nanoseconds. Why are we not using that technology and moving us all forward? So I think regulators in different parts of the world will take different point of view. They'll be, you know, from conservative to liberal in their sense. And in fact, a lot of these new regulatory regimes, if you will, look at Thailand, look at Luxembourg, look at Switzerland, look at Malta. There are a lot of, look at a lot of new regimes that have taken this space and said, this is how we are going to develop our economy. This will have a direct impact on GDP. And they have been more open and liberal in their view and have attracted a lot of investment. You know, look at the laws that the state of Wisconsin has come up. They're the first state in the United States to clearly define what does custody, what is a digital asset in the first place, and what does custody of a digital asset mean. So I think they have set up 11 laws that clearly demarcates a lot of these lines, and federal regulators are learning from those experiments. So it's happening. But your point is well taken. There is a lag, and regulators and innovators need to work together.
We've got just a few minutes.
Okay.
Would you like to some closing comments?
Absolutely. So I can't leave without telling you about this book, Profits in Chaos, Blockchain Strategy to Sow and Survive Disruption. And the foreword is written none other than Dr. Ben Kaczynski. So this is a distillation of, I guess, what, 3 years of research and teaching executives and understanding this new world. What I find is, as evidence in this class, most people conflate technology of one use case to the other. There's lack of a big picture understanding and just lack of frameworks to navigate this space. So this book takes historical lessons. Each chapter starts with a story from a past event, like we did today in the Pony Express, and goes on to relate it to current world and show you frameworks of how you can navigate this space and questions to ask yourself. We've been working on it for a while. If you've ever written a book, it is a very painful exercise to me. My scope of it just keeps increasing, so I just need to lock it down. But it's coming out soon, and Dr. Ben has been very helpful and instrumental in motivating me to write this and helping me clarify my own thoughts in this space. You can sign up, and Ray, I see your comment. I will look into that. It should be working. But if not, just connect me with me on LinkedIn and send me your email and I'll sign you up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roop. Thanks for taking the time. Had the book been out, we would have made sure that each of the students got a copy, but they'll have to get one after you publish. But thank you very much for taking the time. I had a segment to do on the Clubhouse activities and discourse on NFT and on NFT as well. But I'll send that material out to you. And we're shifting, again, think of these things as integrative. I want you to take a systems approach to these environments. Don't think of IoT as separate from blockchain, and certainly not separate from NFTs and things like that. They blend together. We're going to incorporate a whole new ecosystem as we look at sensory experience and augmented reality, virtual world technologies that come to bring a whole different dimensions of patterns of experience into commerce and society as well next time. So a whole new set of discipline on these as well. So thank you very much again, Roop. If we had the room, we'd do an applause. But
thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and feel free to connect. I'm happy to continue these conversations in various aspects, be it education, be it startups, be it large enterprises, be it funds. If you're willing to, or if you're ready to invest already, I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies, but in the companies, reach out and I'll give you some pointers, and just let's keep having this discussion. It's important for MBAs to get involved and create this space.
I think I had mentioned to folks before that there is one major guru in the crypto domain, a Barry Silbert as an SOB, who has DCG.co, that's digitalcurrencygroup.co. He's in New York. He is my test of the serious versus the curious. There's a lot of toys, a lot of garbage, a lot of smoke sculptures going on around the world. And So one of my tests is does Barry see this as real?
Yeah.
And if you look at his portfolio of 150 different companies around the world, initiatives and projects, you look at things like art provenance in France. You look at real estate records in the UK. You look at perceptions of records of Syrian refugees who want to have a record of proof of their property ownership that they had to leave behind and can't trust governmental records in. There are so many applications of the technology that extend way beyond digital currencies. And although his company, his organization is Digital Currencies Groups, 70% of his investments, monitoring, and observations are on applications other than pure digital currency structures. So let's break at this point. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed both Dale and Roop, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. It's been fun. And guys, I see a bunch of questions, so feel free to reach out. George, Gregory, Prashant, Vipul, happy to talk further.
Sure, thank you.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.
Prasanna's hang 10 in Hawaii. He was doing.
Thank you, Dr. Ben. We'll talk soon.
All right.